Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're looking at life through a biblical lens. Tonight, we're looking at the history of Islam. Islam's history with war. She's on the rise. She's moving, attacking citizens, bombing people, tearing things up, shooting, killing, maiming all over the Middle East, and now up into Europe. We saw it in France just a week ago, and now it's moved into Belgium, and these refugees are all over the place, and things are happening. What's going on? We're told that Islam is like Christianity. It's like Judaism. It's basically a peace-loving religion. And that there are some radicals. There are in every group, and there are radicals in this group. We are then pointed back to the Quran, and you can read through the surahs in the Quran. They're just stories. They don't really do much. The largest percentage of the writings of the Quran come from the Bible, from the Old Testament. I think it's upwards of 60%. Was plagiarized. I mean, these are just stories. So you read them and you say, well, what's wrong with this? It's wrong. Their doctrine doesn't come from the Quran. It comes from the Hadith. And there are factions within Islam because there are different views as to what constitutes the doctrine. One group says that it's longer. There are several chapters at the end that this other group doesn't have, and then there are sects within the group, and it just gets crazy, pretty much like Christianity. The world is once again being threatened by Islam, and I say once again because this is not the first time. This is not the second time or the third time. In 624 AD, Muhammad led a raid for booty and plunder against a Meccan caravan, killing 70 Meccans for mere material gain. Between 630 AD and the death of Muhammad in 632, on at least one occasion, Muhammad was actually at the site when these attacks were taking place. They conquered the bulk of the western Arabia and southern Palestine through approximately a dozen separate invasions and bloody conquests. These conquests were in large part holy wars, though the Crusades are the ones that are considered today to have initiated the first holy war. It was Islam who did this first. Islam invented the idea of a holy war. After Muhammad's death, the new Muslim caliph, Abu Bakr, launched Islam into almost 1,500 years of continual imperialist, colonialist, bloody conquest and subjugation of others through invasion and war. He didn't live 1,500 years. He started it, and it lasted that long. Muslim conquests have been launched against hundreds of nations, over millions of square miles, significantly larger in its total reach than the British Empire at its peak. Everything from southern France to the Philippines to Austria to Nigeria, and from Central Asia all the way to New Guinea. The Muslim goal was to have a central government, initially at Damascus, and then at Baghdad, later at Cairo, and then Istanbul, as imperial centers evolving around the area. Islamic law was introduced as the senior law, whether or not wanted by the local people. When you were conquered by Muslims, you found that you were called upon to convert, or you would be a separate group within that community. There were two classes of residents that were established. The conquered paid a tax. It's called dimitude. They were required to pay and I've forgotten what the percentage was, a huge percentage of their annual income every year. Christians and Jews could not bear arms. Muslims could. Christians and Jews could not ride horses. Muslims could. Christians and Jews had to get permission to build a house or to build a business or to build a shed. The Muslims didn't have to do that. Christians could not proselytize. Muslims did it all the time. Christians and Jews had to bow to their Muslim masters as they passed them on the street. They had to get off the sidewalk into the street and bow as they went by. They had to bow to their Muslim masters as they paid their taxes. And Christians and Jews had to live under a law set forth in the Quran, not under their own religious or secular laws. The Muslim conquest of North Africa went relatively easily until the native peoples of North Africa, most importantly the Berbers, were encountered just west of Egypt. We call that Sudan. The North African people fought so strongly against the Muslim that the Muslim imperialist, colonialist, bloody conquest in the West was brought to an almost complete stop between Tripoli and Carthage for more than 25 years. The Muslims broke through in a series of bloody battles, followed by a bloody revenge massacre of the largely Christian groups by these Muslims. The bloody conquest continued through North Africa and through what is now Spain, Portugal, southern France, until they were stopped at the Battle of Poitiers in the middle of France. Read the story of David Livingstone, who traveled all through, started down in the southern part of Africa, but spent most of his later years up in the center and the north part of Africa. And he'll talk about going through areas for months and not seeing a single human being because the Muslims had been through there and either killed off or sold off everybody in sight. The Muslims were pushing up came across from North Africa and Spain, were pushing up into Western Europe, and it didn't seem like anybody could stop them. But Charles Martel rose up. He was a prince of the Franks. Franks were a Germanic tribe. They later migrated to the west and established a community in a country that we now call France. Martel's grandson would be Charlemagne, the first Holy Roman Empire. 25,000 Mohammedans from North Africa struck across the Med through Spain into France, and they encountered Poitiers. This was the last serious attempt to conquer Fortress Europe by Muslims. Many historians believe that the first 100 years of Muslim conquest were imperialist and colonialist, only with little significant forced conversion content. Later it would get worse. With respect to Jerusalem, there was a particular problem in the fact that generally the Christians and their churches, to a lesser degree the Jews, were significantly wealthier than were the Muslims. This was largely because in the early 800s, with Charlemagne, Europe adopted a sort of prototypical foreign aid program for churches that were located in the holy places in Jerusalem, where, to the embarrassment of the Muslims, Christian churches and monasteries outshone their Muslim rivals. Many of these churches and monasteries were run by Western religious orders reporting directly to Rome under Western leaders appointed by Rome. Later, they were subject to Constantinople. You know how all that worked. Literally thousands of European Christian pilgrims made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem from places like Germany and France and Hungary, particularly in the years 1000, 1033, 1064, 1099. Finally, Muslim rulers and European rulers finally sought to enter into treaties of support with one another. As a result, Christian churches became the target of Muslims when enemies of those with whom there were European ties were victorious in a civil war. From time to time, Christian churches were built with Muslim funds when pro-Western rulers came to power in that region. The Ottoman invasion of Christian Eastern Europe, in which the Ottoman Empire invaded the West and conquered and colonialized Greece, all of the Balkans, Romania, Bessarabia, which we now know today as Moldavia, and Hungary, was stopped only at the outskirts of Vienna in 1529. There's also the Mughal conquest of northern India in the 1600s. The Ottomans had a horrible practice. They called it devshirme, whereby the Sultan's agents would periodically take 1/5 of all boys from Christian families. They also called it a blood levy. This was introduced by Sultan Orkhon in 1326. On a fixed date, all fathers were ordered to appear with their children in the public square. The recruiting agents chose the most sturdy, the most handsome, and the most intelligent children. And any father who skirted his duty to provide children was severely punished. This system was open to all kinds of abuse. The recruiting agents often took more than the prescribed number of children, and they sold the surplus children back to their parents. Those unable to buy back their children had to accept those children being sold into slavery. Parents who resisted were killed. Some parents deliberately mutilated their children to make them unattractive to the recruiting agents. Some of the strongest and fittest of the children enslaved through this process were raised to join an elite military corps called the Janissaries, new soldiers, that formed the Sultan's Guard. It lasted from 1350 to 1826. The slave boys were forced into Islam and trained in strict discipline and warfare. In 1826, Sultan Abu Hamid II slaughtered all 26,000 Janissaries. In the 20th century, Muslim Turkey has expelled approximately 1.5 million Greeks from its empire in the east and replaced them with Turks. They have massacred approximately 2 million Armenians and replaced them with Turks in the west. Muslim Turkey has invaded and occupied northern Cyprus, displacing the Greeks that are living there. Muslim northern Sudan has conquered much of southern Sudan, literally enslaving its Christian and pagan populations. Indonesian imperialism has occupied all of the non-Islamic Western New Guinea and incorporated it into Indonesia. Muslim Indonesia has invaded and conquered Christian East Timor with horrible loss of life. This very day, Muslim Indonesia is attempting to destroy Christianity in what used to be called the Celebes. A half dozen Arab countries have fought 2 to 4 wars, depending on how you count, in an attempt to destroy Israel and occupy its territory, and is currently continuing the attempt this very day with the publicly voted consent of 55 of the world's 57 Islamic nations. For no good reason, Muslim Libya has blown up Western aircraft, killing many civilians. Muslim Iraq, in an imperialistic war of aggression, invaded and occupied Muslim Kuwait. Muslim Iraq, in an imperialistic act of aggression, invaded Muslim Iran, with a resulting, some estimates say, the death of 2 million people. Muslim Albania, this very minute, is attempting to enlarge its borders at Christian Macedonia's expense. Muslim northern Nigeria has been and is currently an aggressor against the Christian South. Muslims expelled approximately 800,000 Jews from their homeland between 1947 and 1955. During Jordan's occupation of the West Bank, the kingdom undertook an unsuccessful attempt to make Jerusalem a Muslim city by forcing out approximately 10,000 Christian inhabitants. Back in the day, in the 1500s, there was a sultan by the name of Suleiman the Great. Muslims point to him as one of the great leaders of the people. And somehow people start to think of him as being an Arab. He was not an Arab. He was a Turk. And now Turkey is his legacy. Over a 50-year people, Suleiman conquered most of the Mediterranean, Persia, and Western Arabia. He made several attempts at Europe, only to be driven back. He died of a heart attack at a battle in Vienna in 1566. They buried his heart there. They buried his entrails there so the body wouldn't putrefy. They wouldn't tell the people that he was dead. It took them several weeks, if not months, to get him back home and buried and tell the people later on. They had to wait till his son got installed as his successor, or there would have been chaos. But all of this to say that Islam is not a peace-loving nation or country or people or religion. It has design. It always has. And like always, it's back. Fighting a non-linear war, attacking civilian populations with terror as their weapon. Hiding in plain sight, taunting its enemies, recruiting malcontents and antisocial individuals, offering men who die in the defense of the faith 70 virgins. A benefit that clearly highlights Islam's sensual orientation. It's of the senses. It's not a spiritual thing. It makes Islam a purely human religion, not a faith. If they have any faith at all, it's that Allah will do what's right. Allah is their master. They are Allah's slaves, subjects. They bow to His will. They don't know what it is, but whatever it is, they bow to it. Well, if Allah will. They strap on the bomb and they go out there. Somebody says, this is what Allah wants. He wants you to kill the infidel, spread His message. Okay, that's what Allah wants. He's the master. They're the slaves. Over here on the other side are Jews and Christians. They serve Jehovah, not Allah. And Jehovah is their father. A loving father who wants only the best for his children, and who tells them who He is, what He is, and how He operates, what He wants, and what they can do to please Him. And Jews and Christians want to live in peace. They don't want to conquer the world. They'll let Jesus do that. You see the difference? The aim today of ISIS, Daesh, any of the other names you want to attach to it, is the same as it's always been. It's world domination with Muslims in charge. And when they start this sort of thing, they expose themselves. They expose their religion. They expose their philosophy as earthbound. It's all about this earth. And it's all about ruthlessness. And the idea is when they get enough of this world conquered, then the 13th Imam will come back. Their Messiah will return. And Jesus will be one of His prophets. Jesus will then bow to Him. And Islam will rule the world. Is that what religion is about? Ruling the world? It is if you're Islamic.